I'm alone in a dimly lit, ancient mansion, my breath forming frosty puffs in the frigid air. The shadows seem to twist and writhe, their ominous dance a cruel mockery of my futile attempts to escape. There, in the darkness, stands the apparition, an ethereal, wailing figure, its eyes pools of malevolence. It's a scene right out of your wildest ghost story, and trust me, I never thought I'd find myself living it. Let's rewind a bit. My name's Alex, and I'm not your typical ghostbuster. In fact, I'm not one at all. I'm just an ordinary guy, with a penchant for exploring abandoned places and a morbid curiosity that often gets me into sticky situations. This time, though, I'd bitten off more than I could chew. It all began with an innocuous dare from my buddies. The Hillcrest Mansion, a dilapidated monstrosity that had stood untouched for decades, was rumored to be cursed. They dared me to spend a night there, scoffing at the idea that anything remotely supernatural could be lurking in its decrepit halls. Well, I never backed down from a dare, so I accepted it with a nonchalant grin and a promise of free drinks if I survived. As I stepped through the towering iron gates and into the overgrown garden, I couldn't help but shiver. The place had an aura of dread that clung to it like a second skin. Still, I waved off my unease, convinced it was all just an urban legend. Night fell like a heavy curtain, and the mansion loomed ahead, a silhouette against the moonlit sky. With nothing but a dim flashlight and my phone's camera, I ventured inside. The creaky floors, peeling wallpaper, and musty air told tales of a forgotten era. Each step was a reminder of the building's once grand splendor, now reduced to a ghostly shell of its former self. I explored room after room, the darkness closing in with every step. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant sound of the wind howling through shattered windows. I couldn't help but laugh at my own jittery nerves, mocking my friends' warnings. Then it happened, a chilling whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. It was faint, barely audible, but it carried an unmistakable spectral weight. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed the sound, leading me deeper into the mansion's labyrinthine interior. That's when I saw her, a woman in a flowing white gown, her hair disheveled and her eyes hollow voids of despair. She stood at the end of a corridor, her mournful gaze locked onto mine. Panic surged through me as I realized there was no logical explanation for her presence. I stumbled back, my breath quickening, and fumbled for my phone to capture proof of the supernatural. But as I raised it, the figure dissipated like mist, leaving me with nothing but a blurred photograph and a profound sense of dread. Determined to make sense of the encounter, I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step took me further into the mansion's eerie embrace, and I soon found myself in a room unlike any other. A library, its shelves lined with dusty tomes and crumbling manuscripts. There, at the center of the room, stood an ancient book, its pages yellowed with age. As I approached, an icy breeze swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight. The book seemed to beckon me, its leather-bound cover emblazoned with cryptic symbols. Against my better judgment, I reached out and opened it. The pages were filled with arcane incantations and drawings of grotesque creatures. I couldn't make sense of the text, but it was as though the book itself had a sinister sentience. I had unknowingly unleashed a malevolent force, and the room around me began to twist and distort. I was no longer in the Hillcrest Mansion, but in a nightmarish realm, a place where reality itself seemed to unravel. The walls pulsated with a sickly, otherworldly light, and the shadows danced with a grotesque, eldritch energy. Then, from the inky darkness, emerged the apparition, the same figure I had encountered earlier, now more corporeal, more terrifying than ever. Her wails echoed through the room, and I knew I was trapped in a nightmare beyond comprehension. Desperation fueled my actions, and I desperately sought a way out. The book seemed to be the catalyst for this supernatural nightmare, and I slammed it shut, hoping to break the connection. But the figure only grew more menacing, her eyes blazing with an unholy fury. I was trapped, the walls closing in around me as the apparition advanced, her baleful presence suffocating me. It was a fight to survival, a battle against a malevolent force that defied explanation. Just when I thought I was at the brink of despair, a blinding light erupted from the book, engulfing the room in an explosion of energy. I closed my eyes, shielding them from the brilliance, and when I opened them again, I was back in the library of the Hillcrest mansion. The book lay before me, its pages still open, but the apparition was gone. The room had returned to its eerie but comparatively normal state. I wasted no time in slamming the book shut and fleeing the mansion, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I emerged from the cursed mansion, shaken to my core, and found my friends waiting outside, their laughter and taunts replaced by concern. They had heard my cries of terror and had rushed to my aid. As I recounted my harrowing experience, they exchanged knowing glances. It seemed that the Hillcrest mansion had a dark history, one that involved occult rituals and restless spirits. My friends had dared me to venture into a very real and malevolent realm of the supernatural. So, dear reader, take heed of my cautionary tale. The line between curiosity and the paranormal can be a treacherous one, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. The Hillcrest mansion, with its ancient horrors, is a chilling reminder that the supernatural is not to be trifled with, and that sometimes the most terrifying encounters are the ones we least expect. Listen up, folks, 'cause I've got a tale to tell that'll make your hair stand on end. Picture this. I'm alone in the middle of the night, standing in the eerie glow of an old, abandoned school. The wind whistles through the shattered windows like a mournful ghost, and the creaking floors beneath my feet are enough to give anyone the creeps. And that's just the beginning. You see, they say there's something not quite right about this place, the Millerwood School, a creepy old institution that's been shut down for decades. It's been the talk of the town, the source of countless urban legends whispered in hushed tones. I figured it was all just a bunch of malarkey, but curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to pay the school a visit. What's the worst that could happen, right? As I ventured deeper into the abandoned building, the chill in the air grew more pronounced, sending a shiver down my spine. The place was a wreck, filled with broken furniture and forgotten textbooks. I could almost hear the echoes of long-lost laughter and the faint rustling of papers from the past. Then it hit me, an icy draft, despite the fact that the windows were all boarded up. I whipped out my trusty flashlight, scanning the room for the source of the cold. That's when I saw her, a pale spectral figure, standing at the end of the hallway. Her hollow eye seemed to pierce through my soul, and her long tangled hair hung like a curtain, obscuring her face. My heart leaped into my throat as she began to glide toward me, her movements unnatural, her gaze unwavering. Panic set in, and I tried to flee, but my feet were rooted to the spot, as if some unseen force held me captive. She drew closer, her presence suffocating, and then, in a voice that sounded like it came from the very depths of the grave, she whispered my name. The words echoed through the empty corridors, chilling me to the bone. I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from whatever held me and sprinted toward the exit. As I burst through the front doors, the sensation of being watched lingered, but the apparition remained inside the school. Back outside, I leaned against the cold stone wall, gasping for breath. My heart was still pounding, and a sense of unease gnawed at me. I knew I couldn't ignore what had just happened. It was time to find out the truth about the Millerwood School and the ghostly figure that haunted it. I spent days researching the school's history, poring over old newspaper articles and records. It turned out that the Millerwood School had a dark past, filled with tales of unexplained phenomena and mysterious disappearances dating back to the 1920s. Students and teachers had reported strange apparitions, eerie whispers in the hallways, and objects moving on their own. I decided to dig deeper, to uncover the source of the haunting. Armed with my trusty camera and an arsenal of ghost hunting gadgets I'd purchased online, I returned to the school determined to get some answers. Night after night, I explored the deserted classrooms and hallways, documenting strange occurrences, unexplained cold spots, disembodied voices, and inexplicable fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. It was as if the very walls of the school were alive with a malevolent energy. But the real breakthrough came when I stumbled upon a hidden room deep in the bowels of the building. The walls were covered in arcane symbols and disturbing sketches, and the air was heavy with an oppressive presence. It was clear that this room had been used for some kind of dark ritual. As I investigated further, I found an old journal, its pages filled with the ramblings of a former teacher named Professor Henry Miller. He had become obsessed with the occult and had conducted a series of experiments to contact the spirits of the dead. It was Professor Miller's reckless dabbling in the supernatural that had unleashed the malevolent force that now haunted the school. The apparition I had encountered was the vengeful spirit of a student who had been sacrificed in one of his rituals. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront the spirit and put an end to the haunting. I returned to the school one final time, a sense of determination burning within me. As I entered the haunted hallway, I could feel her presence drawing near. The air grew colder and a feeling of dread settled in. I knew I had to act fast. With the journal in hand, I began to recite an incantation, attempting to communicate with the vengeful spirit. The atmosphere grew charged with a supernatural energy, and the apparition materialized before me, her eyes burning with anger. But as I continued to speak, I could see a change in her demeanor. Her rage began to give way to confusion and then to sadness. She looked at me as if she finally understood the truth, that she had been trapped in this place for far too long, a prisoner of a madman's obsession. In that moment, I offered her forgiveness and release, a chance to finally find peace. The apparition hesitated, her spectral form wavering, and then, with a sigh, she faded away, her presence vanishing from the Millerwood School forever. I left the school that night, knowing that I had put an end to the haunting that had plagued it for decades. It was a bittersweet victory, a reminder that some stories are best left buried in the past. So, dear reader, remember this tale the next time you hear of an abandoned place with a haunted reputation. Sometimes, the things that go bump in the night are more than just urban legends, and the past has a way of coming back to haunt us in the most unexpected of ways. Alright, folks, gather round, because I've got a tale that'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the supernatural. Picture this. I'm alone in the pitch-black basement of the notorious Hawthorne House, one of the spookiest places in town. The air is thick with an eerie, almost electric charge, and my heart is pounding like a drumlin on caffeine. Shadows dance on the walls like malevolent spirits. But I know one thing for sure, I'm not alone down here. You see, I'm a paranormal investigator, or at least, I like to think I am. I've got all the gadgets, the EMF meters, the night vision cameras, you name it. And up until now, I've always been skeptical about the supernatural. But this time, something's different. I've been called in to check out the Hawthorne House, a dilapidated mansion on the outskirts of town that's become the stuff of local legend. People say it's haunted, and they've reported hearing eerie whispers, seeing strange apparitions, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Naturally, I was excited to get in on the action. As I stood there in the basement, the temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath in the frigid air. My flashlight beam bounced along the cracked stone walls, revealing the remnants of a long-forgotten wine cellar. It was the kind of place that gave you the heebie-jeebies even on the sunniest day, but curiosity had drawn me in like a moth to a flame. That's when it started, the inexplicable sound of footsteps echoing in the darkness. I knew I was alone, or at least I thought I was. I could hear them, clear as day, groaning louder and closer. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The footsteps came to a halt just behind me, and I could feel a presence, an icy, malevolent presence, lingering right there, inches from my back. My heart raced as I summoned the courage to turn around and face whatever was behind me. And there she was, a spectral figure in a tattered white gown, her hollow eyes locked onto mine. Her hair hung in dark, disheveled tendrils, and an otherworldly chill seemed to radiate from her. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The apparition reached out a translucent hand toward me, and that's when I finally found my voice. I screamed, a guttural primal scream that echoed through the basement. Without looking back, I bolted up the creaky stairs, the ghostly footsteps still following me. I burst out of the basement and into the moonlit night, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. My car was parked a few yards away, and I practically dove into it, peeling out of the Hawthorne house's driveway with tires screeching. As I sped away, my mind raced with 1,000 questions. Had I really just encountered a ghost? Was it all in my head? Or had I just become the star of my very own horror movie? Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my gut. I replayed that night in my mind, trying to make sense of what had happened. I scoured my footage and recordings, looking for any evidence of the paranormal. But there was nothing, no ghostly figures, no strange voices, nothing to prove what I had experienced. I decided to do some digging into the history of the Hawthorne house, hoping to find some clue that might explain my encounter. What I uncovered was both fascinating and frustrating. The house had a long history, but there was no record of any deaths or tragedies associated with it. No ghostly legends, no local folklore, just a big old house with a creepy basement. I couldn't believe it. Had I really just imagined the whole thing? Had I let my own paranoia and the eerie atmosphere of the place play tricks on me? It seemed that way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there with me that night. I decided to return to the Hawthorne house, determined to prove once and for all that there was a rational explanation for my experience. Armed with my gadgets and a healthy dose of skepticism, I ventured back into the basement, retracing my steps from that fateful night. As I explored every nook and cranny, I began to notice something strange. The old stone walls and uneven floors seemed to create strange echoes and optical illusions. The footsteps I had heard could easily have been the sound of my own shoes against the uneven ground, and the spectral figure I had seen could have been a trick of the dim lighting and my own imagination. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been the victim of my own overactive imagination. The Hawthorne house, with its dark history and eerie ambience, had played tricks on my senses, turning a mundane basement into a chamber of horrors. I left the Hawthorne house that day with a newfound appreciation for the power of suggestion and the tricks our minds can play on us. Sometimes, what we perceive as the supernatural is nothing more than a product of our own fears and the environment around us. So, dear reader, the next time you find yourself in a creepy old place with strange noises and eerie shadows, take a moment to consider whether it's really something otherworldly or just your own imagination running wild. In the end, the scariest things are often the ones we create in our own minds.